This is your host, Danny, and this is Do You Know from English Plus Podcast. Today we're going to talk about the Beatles. But before we start, let me proudly announce the launch of English Plus Magazine. English Plus Magazine is out. It is a weekly magazine that you can get if you become a patron of English Plus on Patreon. The link is in the description. And this is not everything. When you become a patron of English Plus, you will also have access to all our premium episodes. If you're just interested in the premium episodes and you prefer to subscribe using Apple Podcasts, you can do that as well. You can subscribe there and have access to all our premium episodes. And now, without further ado, let's start our Do You Know episode for today. The Beatles were a rock sensation in the 1960s and 1970s. Everyone had a favorite among the four. For some people, it was Paul McCartney, the sweet one, or John Lennon, the funny one. For others, it was George Harrison, the mystery man, or Ringo Starr, the bouncy drummer. The Beatles changed popular music for all time with their songs and their sparkling personalities. And now let's talk about the birth of Beatlemania. All four Beatles were born in Liverpool, England. All four loved music, especially American rhythm and blues and rock music. Lennon and McCartney were the main songwriters, with Harrison as their brilliant guitarist, and Starr joined up in 1962. The group began rocking with the songs Love Me Do, Please Please Me, I Want to Hold Your Hand, and She Loves You. In 1964, the group appeared on American television's The Ed Sullivan Show. They were seen by 73 million people, and the sensation known as Beatlemania was launched. Screaming fans followed the Beatles everywhere and bought their records in unheard-of numbers. The movies A Hard Day's Night in 1964 and Help in 1965 revealed the Beatles' energy and sense of humor. The group seemed more appealing than ever. In their music, the Beatles moved from simple love songs to songs about changes taking place in the 1960s society. The albums Rubber Soul and Revolver were considered musical breakthroughs. Performing before audiences became too dangerous because of the crush of fans. The Beatles gave their last public concert in 1966, but they kept on making records. Many consider Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band 1967 to be their finest album. But just like all good things, the Beatles break up. In 1970, the Beatles announced their breakup. Enormous popularity had taken its toll, wearing them down and causing disagreements. Each of the Beatles went on to a solo career, but fans always hoped the group would get back together. This hope ended when Lennon was murdered by an obsessed fan in 1980. In 2001, Harrison died of cancer, but fans know that the Beatles will somehow never really die. So, that was about the Beatles, and that is our Do You Know episode for today. I hope you like it. I hope you learned things in it that you didn't know about before. Let me remind you again, if you want to have access to our premium episodes, you have two ways. You can subscribe on Apple Podcasts, and you can become a patron of English Plus Podcast on Patreon. And if you decide to become a patron, you will also receive every issue of our weekly English Plus magazine. Now, that being said, let me thank you very much for listening to another episode from English Plus Podcast. This is your host, Danny. I will see you next time.